What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope y'all are doing well. Today what I want to do is a video breakdown on the legendary production of Southside. In case you didn't know, Southside is a multi-platinum producer and has over 1 billion streams. He's produced huge hits for Future like Live from the Gutter, Wicked, and March Madness, just to name a couple. He's worked with other very successful artists like Travis Scott, Drake, 21 Savage, Polo G, G Herbo, and ESTG, just to name a few. So what I'm gonna do is show you guys how to make hard-hitting Southside type beats just like this one. Now, just a quick heads up, this is a little bit longer of a video, but I do want to go in depth on some really important key concepts when it comes to making hard-hitting trap beats like Southside. So if you guys learned anything from the video, or you just enjoy my content, and if you're feeling generous, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification because you guys do not want to miss out on when I'm dropping these production gems. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. The three main concepts that we're going to talk about in the video are going to be: number one, making a simple but sauced up melody progression. Number two is going to be making hard hitting drums. And number three is going to be using basic effects just to chop up the mix. Like I said, the first concept is making a simple but sauced up melody pattern. So let me show you guys the main melody organization here. For the first 8 bars of the mix, I did a melody pattern with the arpeggios being a section below here. So this is what these ones sound like. And then for the second 8 bars, this is the melody pattern that I did. And I do that same thing every 16 bars just to reset the energy and then build the energy back up as the beat progresses. I'm just going to be using this melody pattern right here to describe how to make a simple but sauced up melody. So we have a basic D minor arpeggio shape that I did. I did an ascending arpeggio followed by a descending arpeggio right here, and then it repeats every 2 steps. And like I said, it's in D minor. And this is what it sounds like without the effects from within the arpeggiator here. So for every 2 steps, there's 8 notes, and I thought that was a bit much because I do want to keep the melody pretty simple for this kind of a trap beat, just to allow room for the hard-hitting drums and for an artist. So what I did is when I selected the arpeggio shape, I chose the ascending and descending arpeggiator with the sticky option there. What that does is it repeats the root note a couple more times, and it omits every other note, right? So these are really the only notes that get played during the melody once I select that option for the arpeggiator. And what that does, like I said, is it leaves more room for the drums and the artist, basically. And this is what it sounds like with the arpeggiator option on. That's literally the melody for the entire beat. What I did several times throughout the beat just to build energy is I used a counter melody. And this is what the counter melody sounds like. If you guys were paying attention, you would probably notice that the melody and the counter melody have the same pattern. All I did differently here was I chose a different arpeggiator option. I chose the descending arpeggio. And so it just gives it a different sequence of notes, basically. And for this pattern here, it plays every single note. It doesn't omit any notes. So I thought that was a really good way of building energy because there's a little bit more movement with the extra notes being played during the counter melody. And then I just want to do like a quick little side tangent and talk about layering melodies and counter melodies. Is that when you're layering 2 melody patterns, you want to make sure that the sounds that you choose aren't too similar, because then they end up masking each other, and there isn't like a distinction between both of the melodies. They kind of just like become this one like muddy melody mix, if that makes sense. The 2 best ways to avoid the masking that I'm talking about is to choose sounds that have different characteristics or to pan them accordingly. What I mean by that is for the counter melody, it already had kind of like this width to it, and I'm going to show you using a stereo imager. So as you can see on the stereo imager, there's a lot of width every time a note is being played. And that's because with the type of like wave table that I used, every time a different note is being played, different harmonics are expressed within the sound spectrum. So that's why there's so much movement going on there. However, for the melody, I ended up using Contact, and this sample had a little bit more of a natural mono orientation within the stereo. And so this is what it looked like. This is what it looks like within the stereo system here. So there's definitely movement within the stereo system. However, you can notice that whenever a note attacks, it usually sticks to one area and then moves instead of the whole note being expressed in this wide stereo system here. So just to make sure that the melody was as mono as possible without overdoing it, I just used the Fruity Stereo Shaper and then cranked it up to about 60% there with those two middle knobs just to make the melody as mono as possible without overdoing it. And that brings us to concept number 2, which is making a hard hitting drum pattern. Now, if you're not using a soft clipper, your drum patterns and your beats just aren't going to hit hard. And I think that the Fruity Soft Clipper is still the best soft clipper to use because it doesn't distort your entire mix. For some reason, it just makes your kick and your 808 hit like crazy. And so I've actually made the switch from using the TR5 back to using the stock Fruity Soft Clipper. And so let me show you just how to use that really quick. You're going to want to throw the Fruity Soft Clipper onto your master. I have it last in my chain because you want to put gain into it, but we'll get there. Literally all you got to do is open up Fruity Soft Clipper and that's it. You just leave it in the default setting. But what you have to do is put gain through it or else it's not going to clip anything. So what you do is you open up an EQ like the stock Fruity Parametric EQ2, and you're going to take this knob right here. It's going to be at 0 at default, but you're going to want to push it up until you hear slight distortion in your 808. So for me, I had my gain at 5.5 because it was making the 808 thump like crazy. It was making the kick hit super hard without distorting my melody and my other drum mix, okay? So that's what you want to do. You want to have your Fruity Soft Clipper in default, and then you're just going to open up right before it the Fruity Parametric EQ or any other plugin that will give you gain and just push the gain into the soft clipper, and that's going to make your beat hit super hard. And let's just listen to the beat without the soft clipper. So it's not a bad mix, but the 808 and the kick just aren't driving through. They're not getting that hard hit. So let's listen to it with the gain and the clipper. So that's a night and day difference, right? The mix is way louder and the kick and the 808 are hitting super hard. So that's what you really got to do to get your drums hitting hard, is to make sure that you're using a soft clipper on your master, at the very least on your drum bus. One thing that I must mention when you're trying to get your beats to hit as hard as possible and to sound professional is to use professional sounds, which is why I'm always going to recommend downloading my free drum kit. It's in the link in the description, and all of these sounds are unique but professional sounding as well, so you're not going to get that too many other places. Let's go ahead and check out the 808 pattern that I made, because this really drives the energy of the beat, and let's give this a listen here. This 808 is in my kit. It's the Cuts 808. So it's really a basic 808 pattern. I do like a couple of like motif rolls at the very end here, but those are really easy to do. I just created third note rolls followed by eighth notes here. And then for the last roll at the very end of the pattern here, I just double timed the third note roll and then alternated between an eighth note. So it goes the roll, eighth note, roll, eighth note. So what I usually do for my beats is I separate them by 8 bars, because usually a verse is 16 bars. The pattern that I just showed you was 8 bars, and that's for the first section. And then for the last 8 bars, I did a little bit of a breakdown. At the very end of each 2-step sequence, which two steps would be here. I do a roll. For these two steps, I do a roll. I just do like a descending roll right here. Same thing here for these two steps. I do a little bit of a roll, and then I do a bit of a breakdown. It's not a very super technical breakdown. It's a pretty intuitive breakdown. You've heard them hundreds of times on like trap productions, I'm sure. So let me play the whole thing for you here, and you guys can get kind of an idea on like what the breakdown sounds like. For the first two beats here, I did two rolls instead of the one roll that I did for the pattern that I used for the first 8 bars right here. Kind of the same like rolling structure here, except I use a little bit of a slide. So I slid these like last few 8th notes right here, and then it started over again. And then for the breakdown, I'll play the last 2 beats here. So all I really did is I took the pattern from before, from the first 8 bars, I kept the rolls, and then I just added in another roll before this last section here. So I actually have 2 rolls back to back to create that sort of breakdown. Even for the whole 16 bars, it's just a basic trap 808 pattern. And then I did something very similar with the kick. So as you can see, I basically copy and pasted from the 808 pattern, except I didn't keep the rolls from the 808 because you don't want to be rolling the kicks. The kicks are just supposed to add an extra transient to the 808s to make the 808s hit harder. And we also want to use the kick to add bounce and energy to the beat. And beyond that, we don't want the kicks doing anything else. It's just going to take away from the bounce and just muddy up the mix. And then for the snare, I follow a very similar trap style snare pattern. This is what it sounds like here. I'm going to play the kick pattern with the snare just so you have context on what everything really sounds like here. So these snares right here are the main snares that I use for the pattern. And then what I did for the counter snares, just to add a little bit of bounce, I added the counter snares right before. And so what I did for the counter snares here that I highlighted in red, I just decreased the volume a little bit. Whenever you pitch a drum higher, its transient is a little bit more noticeable in my opinion. So with the snare, at least with this snare, what I did is I just decreased the volume in the piano roll just so it wasn't taking away from the actual rhythm, if that makes sense. Kind of like what I did with the 808. You guys probably heard the snare pattern while I was playing the 808 pattern for the breakdown, but the snare is pretty much doing the same thing. So instead of using a basic counter snare that I did for the first 8 bar pattern, I'm using more rolls. Whenever you're rolling a snare, the transients tend to get a little bit louder, so that's why I decrease the volume on the rolls. So you can see like right here, I decrease the volume on these two, and I decrease the volume on these. And then let me show you the hi-hat pattern. I think the hi-hat pattern is really important with establishing the rhythm of the beat. I think this formula has worked really well with me, and I've pretty much just emulated this type of hi-hat pattern on what type of patterns I notice with Southside's production. Let's give the hi-hat pattern a listen here. So for this pattern, the best way to start off whenever you're working with a trap beat is 2 steps. So if you take your hi-hat, which I took the hi-hat out of my kit, the 2 easy hi-hat, and then I right-clicked, and then you go to fill each 2 steps. And when you click on fill each 2 steps, let me just show you what happens. If you click on the ATL hi-hat, and fill each 2 steps, this is what happens. Okay, it literally fills each 2 steps all the way down throughout the entire pattern. So that's what I did to start off with the 2 easy hi-hat. And then once I did that, I just added rolls in between. Something that I noticed with Southside and other trap producers like ATL Jacob and Metro Boomin, they do slides either off of a kick, towards the kick, off of the snare, or towards the snare. So what I did here is I rolled off of the snare. So let's give this a listen. And just for a visual tool, I'm just going to highlight the notes that overlap with the snare. Okay, so these red notes are where the snare hits, so I'm rolling off of the snare. I roll off the snare 3 times, and then I roll into the snare right here. So this is what the last beat sounds like. Something that I do and something that I notice that producers like Southside do is they pan their rolls. So if you just highlight a roll, for instance, I'll highlight this one. And if you go down to note pan, you can basically select which stereo side that you want to hear it from. So because the notes for this descending roll start high and then sweep down, I wanted to do a sweeping across effect in the stereo system. So I started by selecting left, and then as the roll continues, it goes from left to right. So it's kind of like sweeping across. I'm not sure if you guys can notice that. So those are the snares, the kicks, the 808s, and the hi-hats. They're all pretty basic in terms of patterning, but simplicity really is the key when it comes to making trap music. And then that takes us to the third concept, which is using simplistic effects to make the beat a little bit more engaging. And so what I did for the first verse here, because technically this is kind of like the chorus, and then the verse starts right here. Let's give this a listen here. All right, so that's like the tape stop effect, and really all I did was use, let's go to my melody bus, Effectrix, a pretty cool plugin. It's like Gross Beat, so if you don't have Effectrix, don't sweat it. A lot of the effects that you need for trap music, you can just do with Gross Beat. If you just go to vinyl, and then you highlight the notes of the last beat, and then click on stop mode, you just want to click on right there, and then it'll just stop, it'll slow stop the beat. And so I did that at the end of the first 2 beats there, just to like chop up the beat and make it seem more interesting, like a little mini drop before the verse kind of like really got started at the 35th beat right there. And then do something very similar at the 41st. And that was just a quicker tape stop. And then I used a preset that I created within Serum to create this this riser, like siren type sound layered with white noise. Max minus. And without getting like really deep into sound design, all I did was create a couple of LFOs that started off with a low pass to a high pass, just so all of those higher frequencies are reintroduced to build up energy before the drop at the 17th bar right here. So I hope all that makes sense. Okay, so that's what it sounds like on its own there. So a couple of really basic effects, and if you guys want that Serum preset, shoot me a comment, and maybe I'll start adding my Serum presets to my video links. Those are the 3 main key concepts when it comes to making hard-hitting trap beats like Southside. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I enjoy making content like this and kind of just like sharing industry secrets. So if you guys like this type of content, if you like me teaching you what the pros are doing, go ahead and like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. You do not want to miss out on when I'm dropping these gems. Until next time, peace.